Before Kai Takai became a ruin, it was known for its silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that let cruelty pass unnoticed. Students learned what not to see. Teachers learned which complaints to lose. Everyone learned how to walk past suffering and call it survival. Mei-Ling was small, quiet and careful. She believed that if she stayed invisible, the world would leave her alone. It didn't. Her parents were not rich. They worked long hours just to keep food on the table and pay the rent. They loved her deeply, but exhaustion consumed them. By the time Mei-Ling returned home crying from school, her parents were too tired to notice, too burdened by the weight of survival to pry into the shadows of her life. She never told them what was happening. She was scared, ashamed, and convinced no one could save her. Her school life was a torment. Bullies humiliated her daily. They shoved her in lockers, tripped her in hallways, whispered insults in every corner, and scribbled degrading words on her notebooks. No teacher intervened. No student dared to stand up. Mei-Ling kept her suffering to herself, quietly wishing the cruelty would end. Among the students there was one who cared, though timid beyond reason. Jun, a quiet boy with wide eyes, saw what Mei-Ling endured. He wanted to defend her, to speak up, to make the bullying stop, but fear froze him. The bullies were vicious, and he knew he'd be next if he tried. Instead, he watched in silence, carrying the guilt in his heart like a stone. Then, one rainy afternoon, after another humiliating prank in front of the whole school, Mei-Ling climbed the rooftop of the tallest building, the science block. The wind whipped around her, rain plastering her hair to her face. She whispered a single word no one heard, "Stop." And then she jumped. Lok was popular, handsome, loud, untouchable. Teachers liked him. Students followed him. He knew exactly how much power he had, and he enjoyed using it on people who couldn't fight back. What he did to Mei-Ling wasn't loud at first. It was slow, careful, cruel in ways that left no bruises. He started by spreading rumors, whispers that followed her through hallways. He told people she was dirty, that she was obsessed with boys, that she was easy. None of it was true, but truth didn't matter. By the time Mei-Ling noticed, classmates were already laughing when she walked past. Then came the notes. Lok would slip folded pieces of paper into her desk, her bag, even her shoes. Inside were drawings, stick figures of her falling from buildings, her face distorted, her body broken at the bottom. Sometimes there were words, "You should jump. No one would miss you. Do us all a favor." Once, he got a recording of her crying in the stairwell after he and his friends cornered her and mocked her voice, replaying it later on his phone so others could laugh. He never touched her. He didn't need to. The humiliation did the work for him. The cruelest thing he did happened 2 days before her death. During lunch, in front of half the school, Lok projected photos onto a classroom screen, edited images stolen from her social media, altered to make her look obscene. The room erupted in laughter. Someone shouted, "Is this why you're always alone?" Another yelled, "Jump already!" Mei-Ling ran. No teacher followed her. No student defended her. Jun watched it all happen from the back of the room. He remembered gripping his desk so hard his nails broke skin. But he still didn't move. That memory haunted him for the rest of his life. Mr. Chen didn't know any of this until after Mei-Ling died. He found the drawings hidden beneath her mattress. The notes folded and refolded so many times they were soft as cloth. He listened to recordings recovered from her phone laughter, cruelty, voices chanting her name like a curse. When he confronted one of the bullies at school, Lok smirked. "There's no proof," he said calmly. "She was weak. That's not my fault." That was the moment something inside Mr. Chen broke. Days later, Mr. Chen broke. Chen waited outside a late-night arcade where Lok liked to go with his friends. Neon lights flickered overhead. The street smelled of rain and cigarette smoke. Mr. Chen hadn't planned anything. There was no strategy, no revenge fantasy, only a weight in his chest, that had nowhere to go. When Wai-lok came out laughing, Mr. Chen called his name. Wai-lok turned, annoyed. "What do you want, old man?" Mr. Chen stepped forward and grabbed the boy by the collar, demanding to know why. Why his daughter? Why the drawings? Why the laughter? Wai-lok shoved him back. "She jumped," Wai-lok said with a shrug. "That's on her." Something snapped. Mr. Snapped. Chen's hand closed around a rusted metal pipe lying beside a stack of trash bags. Something discarded, forgotten, like his daughter had been. He swung once. He didn't aim. He didn't scream. The sound it made was dull, final. Wai-lok collapsed without another word. Mr. Chen stood there for a long time, the pipe slipping from his fingers, the rain washing blood into the gutter. When the police arrived, he didn't run. He didn't resist. As they took him away, he felt nothing. No triumph, no relief. Only the terrible knowledge that justice had come too late, and it had cost him everything he had left. Crushed by grief and burdened by the world. Unable to bear the loss of her daughter and now her husband, Mrs. Chen chose to end her life the same way her daughter had. Their deaths were quiet tragedies, barely noted by the outside world. But to June, they were the final spark. June had always been small and timid, but grief and guilt transformed him. He vowed that the bullies and anyone who had allowed Mei-Ling's suffering would pay. He meticulously recorded their names, habits, and weaknesses in a notebook. Over the years, he trained himself physically, lifting weights to build strength, practicing martial arts to defend himself, and sharpening his mind to manipulate situations. June kept a notebook for years, not a diary, a ledger. Every page had a name. Every name had a memory. He did not rush. He believed justice worked best when it was slow enough to be mistaken for fate. On June's first page, in his ledger, was Wai-lok's name. Wai-lok was the architect of Mei-Ling's humiliation. He spread lies, edited photos, and orchestrated the public shaming that sent her running to the rooftop. He encouraged the chants. He laughed the loudest when someone yelled, "Jump!" Wai-lok was the one Mei-Ling's father killed. June never touched his page again. That name was crossed out in red, not by June's hand, but by blood already spilled. The second name on June's ledger was Chung-ho. Chung-ho was a star basketball player. Teachers protected him. He liked to use his size to make cruelty look like accidents, shoulder-checking Mei-Ling in crowded hallways, knocking her books to the floor, stepping on her fingers when she reached for them. Once, he locked her inside a gym equipment room for over an hour. Through the metal door, he laughed and said, "No one's coming. You don't matter." When a janitor finally let her out, Mei-Ling didn't cry. She just stared at the floor, like something inside her had already left. Years later, Chung-ho worked construction on high-rise renovations across the city. He was still big, still confident, still careless. Jun studied him for months. He learned the routes Chung-ho took across scaffolding, which shortcuts he used, which safety protocols he skipped, because nothing ever happened. Jun didn't sabotage equipment outright, nothing obvious, nothing illegal on paper, just small changes, misalignments, delays. But Chung-ho wasn't stupid. The night it went wrong, Jun was still on site, too close, too impatient. Chung-ho noticed movement where there shouldn't have been any. A shadow above. Footsteps that didn't belong to his crew. "Hey!" Ching-ho shouted, climbing higher. "Who's up there?" Jin froze. For a moment, the city seemed to hold its breath. Chung-ho climbed faster, rage and adrenaline driving him upward. He was strong, he was trained, and he was getting closer. Jun ran, not away from him, across. Jun vaulted from one section of scaffolding to another, fingers catching rusted bars, body swinging out over open air. Wind roared in his ears. 30 stories below, traffic moved like blood through veins. Chang-ho followed, shouting now, furious. "You think you can run?" Jun didn't look back. He climbed higher, faster, muscles burning, timing every movement the way he had practiced for years. Parkour, grip strength, breathe control. Every jump was calculated, every landing precise. Then Chang-ho slipped, just for a second. Enough. Chang-ho screamed, not Jun's name, not for help, but something else. "No, wait!" Jun reached the edge of the roof and pulled himself over, rolling out of sight as Chang-ho lost his footing behind him. Witnesses later said Chang-ho looked terrified as he fell, like he had finally recognized someone from his past standing above him. Security footage showed nothing useful, just a blur, just shadows, just a man falling where he shouldn't have. The case was ruled an accident. That night, Jun burned the clothes he wore and added a single line beneath the name in his ledger. "You chased her. Now you know how it feels." He didn't sleep for 3 days, but no one ever came looking for him. The third person on Jun's ledger was Lam Xie-ying. She mastered kindness the way others mastered cruelty. She was the girl who sat beside Mei-Ling in class and whispered, "Ignore them. I'll help you." She lent her tissues when Mei-Ling cried, shared her lunch, walked with her between periods when the hallways felt too loud and too sharp. Then, behind her back, she turned every secret into currency. Xi Ying forwarded screenshots of Mei-Ling's messages, edited, cropped, stripped of context. She secretly recorded conversations where Mei-Ling admitted fear, loneliness, desperation, and shared them in private group chats labeled, "Don't show her." She laughed softly while typing reassurances, then laughed louder when others mocked the girl who trusted her. The worst betrayal came weeks before Mei-Ling's death. Xi Ying convinced her to confide in her, everything. The bullying, the thoughts of escape, or the rooftop. The next day, those words appeared on the walls of the girl's bathroom, rewritten in red marker. "If I jump, will anyone care?" Mei-Ling knew then. The smile had never been real. She stopped talking to Xi Ying, stopped trusting anyone, stopped believing survival was possible. Xi Ying grew up beautiful, ambitious, and hungry for admiration. She reinvented herself completely, new name spelling, new wardrobe, new voice online. By her late 20s, she worked at a powerful PR firm, managing high-profile clients and shaping public narratives. Image was her religion. Jun studied her for years. He learned her insecurities, her rivalry with a senior colleague, the resentment simmering beneath forced teamwork, the corners she cut to climb faster. Jun didn't destroy her image directly. He curated it. Anonymous accounts began resurfacing old content, not accusations but patterns, screenshots time-stamped years apart, audio clips stitched together to show manipulation. Emails leaked selectively enough to suggest misconduct, not enough to point to a single source. At the same time, June quietly fed information to someone close to her, a co-worker desperate to take her place. Someone jealous. Someone already watching for a chance. The firm turned on her fast. "Meetings without invitations. Clients reassigned." Whispers behind glass walls. Her boss. Once her mentor began documenting everything, preparing to make her the example. Si Ying panicked. She accused the co-worker publicly, screamed about betrayal, threatened lawsuits, but no one listened. They were already tired of her smile. One night, after staying late to fix things, Xie Ying fell from the office building's upper terrace. The official report said it was stress. Rumors blamed the co-worker. The firm quietly paid settlements and moved on. But June knew the truth. He had sent one final message from an account Xie Ying didn't recognize but felt deep in her bones. "You told her to trust you." She never replied. June watched the news coverage from a cafe across the street. When her name appeared on the screen, he crossed it out in the ledger. Not with satisfaction, but with precision. Beneath it, he wrote, "Smiles cut deeper than fists. The fourth name of Jun's ledger was Poon Tak Shing. He never insulted Mei-Ling to her face. He never shoved her, never laughed out loud. He watched. Tak Shing hid his phone in places where pain lingered. Behind bookshelves, beneath stair rails, inside empty classrooms. He filmed Mei-Ling crying, shaking, and pleading for silence. He zoomed in when her hands trembled. He lingered when her voice broke. He uploaded the footage to private groups with captions like, bonus content, and she does this every day. When Mei-Ling once caught him recording and begged him to stop, Tak Shing didn't apologize. If I don't film it, he said calmly, someone else will. That was the day Mei-Ling stopped crying where anyone could see. Tak Shing grew up to work in surveillance, security systems, monitoring software, institutional cameras. Watching people had become his profession. June waited. Then one night, every camera in Tak Shing's apartment turned on at once. Walls of screens lit the room. Bathroom feeds, bedroom angles, corners he didn't remember installing. On every monitor played footage. Tak Shing had once filmed himself, Mei-Ling crying, Mei-Ling shaking, Mei-Ling whispering, please. The audio layered over itself until it became unbearable. Tak Shing was found hours later, alive but unresponsive, kneeling in the center of the room, eyes wide, mouth open as if still screaming. Doctors called it a psychotic break. He was transferred to a long-term mental care facility. The facility was understaffed, overworked, careless in small, fatal ways. One night, a door in the high-risk ward was left unlocked. Officially, it was a mistake. Unofficially, security logs showed the lock had been disengaged manually, just long enough for one patient to wander. The other patient had a history of extreme fixation, violent oral behavior, and sensory obsession. He had been placed in isolation for biting, compulsively, relentlessly. Tak Shing was in the observation room. The cameras were running. What happened next was never described in detail publicly, only that the footage existed, only that staff who reviewed it resigned, only that the recording leaked briefly online before being scrubbed, copied, mirrored, passed hand to hand like contraband. Viewers said Tak Shing didn't scream. They said he stared at the camera the entire time. The death was ruled accidental, a tragic failure of protocol. No one questioned it too closely. June watched the footage once. Just once. He didn't save it. Next to Tak Shing's name, he wrote, you wanted to watch. Then, beneath it, smaller, now everyone has. He crossed the name out. Slowly. The last person on June's ledger was Yuan Mei-Fan. Mei-Fan liked to be called fair. She said it often, to parents, to administrators, to herself. But fairness to Mei-Fan was negotiable. Over the years, complaints surfaced quietly, never loudly enough to stick. Parents would come in angry, demanding action about bullying, harassment, grades altered by intimidation. Mei-Fan would listen, nod, sigh sympathetically, and then glance at the envelope placed carefully on her desk. Money softened everything. She had dismissed accusations before. Rewritten reports, lost paperwork. She told vulnerable students they were too sensitive, told parents their children needed to toughen up, and told herself she was just surviving in a system that rewarded silence. When Mei-Ling came to her desk, hands shaking, voice barely steady, Mei-Fan didn't even look up. If you can't handle school, she said flatly, that's your problem. That was the day Mei-Ling stopped asking adults for help. June didn't need to create lies when it came to his former teacher, Mei-Fan. Mei-Fan had already built them. Anonymous reports resurfaced years later, filed correctly this time. Financial irregularities. Patterns of dismissed complaints linked to unexplained deposits. Parents, long silent, were contacted quietly and asked the same question again. Did anyone ever ask you for money? Enough of them answered yes. An internal review began. Then another, then an audit. Mei-Fan's carefully maintained image collapsed. Her adult children, who had grown up watching her preach morality while practicing greed, turned on her publicly. They gave statements, distanced themselves. One of them said on record, "She taught other people's children about justice. She never taught us." Her husband, tired of years spent orbiting her hunger for status and cash, drained their accounts and left her for a younger woman before the pension freeze took effect. One rainy afternoon, rushing to a meeting with her lawyer, Mei-Fan slipped while exiting a tram. The fall wasn't dramatic, just wrong. The damage to her leg was permanent. Nerve death, no recovery, no appeal. She spent the rest of her days in a wheelchair, watching former students walk past her without recognition, watching news reports mention her name only as a footnote in a larger scandal. No one visited, no one apologized, no one asked her version of events. Jun visited her once at a group home she now stays at. He didn't announce himself. He didn't introduce his name. He waited until the nurse left, until the room settled into the hum of machines and distant voices. Mei-Fan noticed him only when his shadow crossed the floor longer than it should have been. She squinted at him, confused. "You don't remember me," June said softly. Her eyes narrowed, searching. "I was in your class," he continued. "Back row, quiet. You never called on me." Something flickered in her expression, not recognition yet, but unease. "You told her she was too sensitive," June said. "You didn't even look at her." Her hands began to tremble on the armrests. Jun opened the ledger, not for her to read, but for her to hear the sound of pages turning. Names. So many names. "She stopped asking for help that day," he said. She went to the roof alone. Mei-Fan's breath hitched. Her eyes darted to the door, to the hallway, to the corners of the room, as if expecting someone else to be there. Jun leaned closer, not threatening, just close enough that she could smell the rain on his coat. "You taught us consequences," he whispered. "You just never thought you'd be part of the lesson." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. June closed the ledger. He didn't cross her name out. He drew a line beneath it and wrote slowly, deliberately, where she could see his hand move. "She asked you for help. You refused. Now you sit and remember." As June turned to leave, Mei-Fan screamed, not loud, not dramatic, but broken, panicked, the sound of someone realizing too late that punishment doesn't always arrive wearing a uniform. June never looked back. Some lessons, he believed, were meant to last. When June finished the ledger, there were no names left. Only one sentence, written years earlier in shaky handwriting: "I should have spoken when she was alive." By then, June had become something else entirely. He worked as a missing persons investigator, unofficially at first, helping families no one else wanted to help. Runaways. Kids swallowed by the city. Cases the police closed too fast. He had learned how systems failed people. He knew where silence hid. June returned to Kai-Tak High on a night soaked in rain, carrying nothing but his ledger and the weight of everything he had failed to do. He climbed to the rooftop, where Mei-Ling had jumped, and stood at the edge, staring down at the indifferent city. He spoke into the dark, admitting what he had never said aloud, that he had seen the bullying, heard her cry, understood her fear, and still chosen silence. He called himself a coward. He said her death was partly his fault. He said the ledger, the years of revenge, the ruined lives he had engineered, were not justice but penance. Then he stepped forward, ready to end what he had never had the courage to begin. A hand seized his wrist and tore him back. Mei-Ling stood behind him, pale and broken, her eyes full of everything he had refused to face. She told him she had waited for him to help her, and he never came. She told him he had abandoned her when it mattered most. Jun collapsed, sobbing, begging for forgiveness he knew he did not deserve. She did not comfort him. She told him forgiveness was not free. She said he could never undo her death, never erase his silence, never make himself innocent. But she had seen what he became afterward. How he hunted down those who destroyed her, how he exposed lies, forced consequences, and refused to let her suffering be forgotten. His revenge did not save her, but it saved others. That was why she stopped him. Not because he was good, but because he had learned. She told him that cruelty always spreads, that watching and doing nothing is another form of violence, that every person who harms someone leaves a wound that never fully closes. Then she vanished, leaving June alone on the roof, shaking and alive. He walked away at dawn with no illusions of redemption, only a promise to live with purpose and never again mistake silence for safety, for himself or for anyone else. Kaitak High was demolished the following year. No one reported anything strange during the demolition. No screams, no shadows, no unfinished business rising from the dust. The building came down quietly, like something that had already been dead for a long time. June did not watch. He was working. He always was. He kept the ledger locked away, not as proof, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of what happens when silence is mistaken for kindness. He never added another name. He never erased the sentence on the last page, "I should have spoken when she was alive." Some nights, he still dreamed of the rooftop. In those dreams, he arrived earlier. In those dreams, he said something. In those dreams, she listened. He always woke up before finding out if it would have been enough. John continued his work, finding the lost runaways, missing children, people forgotten by systems built to overlook them. He didn't call it redemption. He didn't believe in that. He called it responsibility. He showed up when others hesitated. He asked questions when others stayed quiet. He stayed when things became uncomfortable. He had learned what indifference costs. People in Hong Kong still whispered about him, about the man who understood grief too well, about how he never ignored a cry for help, about how he sometimes stood too long in the rain, staring at empty rooftops. June never confirmed the stories. He didn't need to. If asked about ghosts, he would say only this: some don't want revenge. They want witnesses. And on certain nights, when the city is quiet and the rain is soft, John still looks up. Thank you for staying until the end of this story. If it haunted you, moved you, or lingered in your thoughts longer than you expected, then this story has found its place. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more supernatural narratives like it, please consider subscribing to the channel. Don't forget to give a thumbs up. New stories will continue to unfold here, where restless spirits and unfinished lives still linger. Until next time, listen closely. The past has a way of whispering back,